When I was very first starting on the spiritual path, 1971, I moved to Ananda village, which was very simple living at that time. Now it's quite built up, but then it was very, very simple. And for the first 10 years, I lived in the monastic area with about 10 or 12 other women in the area where Swami Kriyananda's house is, for those of you who know. Lived in a little trailer, no running water, no electricity. It was no indoor plumbing. It was absolutely fabulous. No indoor plumbing means that you get to go outside at times when you would not go outside otherwise, and you get to see snow, and you get to see moon, and you get to see rain, and you get to see all kinds of things you would not see. So inconvenience becomes something else. And we were all just learning about the spiritual path, and SRF had not, Self-Realization Fellowship had not yet published Master's commentaries on the Bible or on the Gita. It was decades later, but we had a bootleg copy of it that one of our industrious members, Shivani, had managed to find published in magazines that were now out of print, and she bought a Xerox machine, she copied them, so we had all these, we were sued for it later. But Shivani testified it was our Bible, and we were going to have it. And so we were deemed, just out of interest, it was determined by the judge, actually it was even a jury at that point, that we had violated the copyrights because we didn't own it and we'd published it and sold it. That's not really proper. However, they called it fair use because it was not available in any other form. So Divine Mother played with us on that one. So anyway, somewhere in all of that, in my mid-20s, I had these Xerox copies of years of SRF magazines in which Master had published his commentary on the Bible. I was raised in a Jewish family. We were not, we were secular Jews, what do you call it? We're culturally identified as Jews, but we weren't religiously practicing. There's all kinds of nuances. In every culture you go into, there's all these things. So that was it. So we were definitely Jewish, no question about it. But I didn't really practice Judaism either. I have to tell you a funny story, crazy. My parents were, for the most part, extremely supportive of whatever I chose to do. And I was at Ananda a long time. And then Swami wrote the oratorio. And they kind of kept peripherally in touch with what was going on at Ananda. And after Swami wrote the oratorio, The Life of Christ in Music, they found out that I'd also become a Christian. Becoming a yogi was not such a problem, but actually becoming a Christian was really a tricky business. That's the line in the sand that you can do. That's why so many Jews are Buddhists, because then they don't have to deal with this. So the next time I went to visit my parents were very dear and extremely supportive, but every so often, especially my mother, she would get some idea in her head. So somehow they decided, now I've been at Ananda by now, like 15 years, 16 years, something like that. But now it's suddenly become tragic because I've become Christian. And my first defense was to tell her that I'd always been Christian, which was a pretty stupid defense, but that's the one that I told her. And then she decided, and my mother was not a typical Jewish mother, but she would fall into it. If only we had raised you in Judaism, then this wouldn't have happened. And I tried to reassure her that it really wasn't her fault. She, kept going on like this, and this little voice inside my head said, let her take responsibility. So instead of resisting her, I started saying, yes, Mother, what a tragedy. If only everything would have been different, but what can we do now? This went on for 5 or 10 minutes, and she never brought it up again, ever after that. So in the context. So now, this is years earlier, I'm in my little trailer. It's all vivid. The physical situation was vivid to me because everything was so simple at that time. We didn't have television, we didn't have radio, we didn't have anything because we didn't have electricity. Internet was still, I don't know if Steve Jobs had even been born yet. I mean, it hadn't really started, any of that. So I'm reading these pages here. And they're telling me about a Jesus that I knew nothing about. Fortunately, the way I was raised, it was neutral. I didn't have anything to overcome. It was completely neutral. But I'd absorbed living in society, especially in earlier years when Christianity was in the schools and it was just much more. I just had an idea, all these ideas, none of which had any relationship to what was really true. It was just the conventional ideas of church denominations filtered down to a child brain. But I was literally breathless. I remember reading those pages and just feeling like the breath was being just drawn out of me. No, not breathless, like really samadhi, but just in surprise. What do you know? That this universal reality, that everything that I had always wanted in my whole life, which is what had brought me to Ananda, which is meaning, which was joy, which was an understanding of how life really works, which was also a little bit of help. Somebody who knows something, who's going to help me to learn it. And it was all there. It was all in the Bible. It was all in the life of Christ. I was absolutely thrilled. Even to this day, I can remember. It was one of those times in my life, I believe I was in seclusion. And so I was just reading it really on my own. And I just was so thrilled at the possibility and so amazed that I'd never heard about it before. Never heard it like that. And from that time up to standing here right now, I've always had this particular deep relationship with Christ. Just not in the distant church sort of way at all, but it's just some living person who has walked the path that I'm trying to walk, and he knows how to do it. And if I ask him, he'll help me. And years passed, and I traveled a great deal around the world, but for one reason or another, I never got to Israel until 2015, which was quite late in my life. And I went there once, and the experience was very impersonal. It was very interesting. I went with the Expanding Light tour, and it just came to me that I should do this. I've never been there. My grandmother planted a lot of trees in Israel for me. That was my rather not much appreciated birthday present year after year. Dear granddaughter, there's been a tree planted in Israel for you. Swell, Mom. Grandma, thanks, So somewhere in there's all these trees growing with my name on them. But I had never been there either as a Christian or a Jew. I just had never been. And I expected to have a very personal experience because by that time I had been teaching about Jesus' teachings all the time. I mean, in the context of Ananda, it just became something I did. And I felt very personal about it. And I went to Israel. I was quite surprised. It was extremely impersonal. It was extremely uplifting, very uplifting. But it was always this consciousness that was way beyond, just way beyond, the Mount of Transfiguration. And it was wonderful. But I sort of felt like, well, I've been there, done that. A couple of years later, I just got one of those email blasts, This is in favor of marketing because it works. Email blasts. One place left on the Assisi tour to Italy. And just like electric. My place, my place. I sent them a note. Me, I'm going. And I go this time, and it's all the things that I had thought about. I have walked on these holy streets. I have been in this room. This is not the first time I'm seeing the sunrise over that mountain. Our spiritual lives are so utterly unpredictable. This is one of the things I want to talk about. You think we know something about it? Ha ha. It comes to us. We're not making it out of the same material that we are made out of. And I became so entranced with being there, and then it crossed my mind. There's many devotees of Ananda in India, Indian-born, raised in Hinduism, and yet Jesus, Babaji, Krishna, and I figure we've had to learn to accept Babaji Krishna. They can learn to accept Jesus. We can do this. The missionaries left a bad taste in the culture of India because of their disrespect for the culture there. So it's been a little hard. They've had more to overcome. But it occurred to me when I'm there in India this time, in Israel this time, that I should bring Ananda devotees from India to Israel to help them understand. I called Daya in New Delhi, and the same day, at the same time, she had the same thought. So we make these plans. We're going to bring all these Indian devotees. We're going to walk where Jesus walked. We're going to teach them what Master knows about Jesus and overcome all these resistances and prejudices. Then I realized that if, after all these years, I lead a tour anywhere, and I don't take the people from this community, they might not let me back in. I'm not sure. I didn't want to test it. So we did 2. We went, basically Palo Alto went, and then I stayed there, and then the Indians came. So here we are with the Indians now, and there's this fantastic cave that is now part of a convent. It might be I can't remember, the Franciscan maybe, in Israel. I'm terrible with geography. I know it's in that country. It's somewhere there. And it's the cave where John the Baptist used to seclude. So this is a red-hot spiritual property to go and visit. Not everyone knows about it. It's a little out of town. Amazing. Go there with our crowd. Then we go there the next time with the Indians. Sergio and I are sitting. The cave is just big enough for the 30 of us to be in. Dunbar is in the front. Dunbar is an American, and he was playing chants. And then they passed the harmonium all the way back to Sergio, who's Indian. And he starts singing some really dynamic chant of Masters, but in Hindi. And because it's all Indian, they're going with him, and we are rocking that cave. It's really happening like this. But he and I are in the doorstep, so it's also going out to all the priests and nuns who are also there. I don't know what the words were, but they could tell it was not what was usually sung. So we just finished chanting, and I all of a sudden become aware of the fact that there is a very large man in a priest's collar, Catholic priest. I'm sitting, I'm really small, and he's really big. And the chant ends, he says, "This is a Christian place." I was raised in a Jewish family, I repeat. My brother was the state champion debater of the state of Texas, which is a big state, twice, first place. So I know how to respond. And normally I would have said all kinds of things, but we were so exalted and so joyous. From my little step up the stairs, I look up and I say, "We're here for Jesus." Then he asked us if we're going to make any more of this heathen noise, and I said, "We're just about to meditate." "I hope it's a Christian meditation," he said. I say again, "We're here for Jesus." Like, where does that come from? Where does it even come out of me? This is not my normal way of responding to challenge, nor is it my normal response to just be kind and just, I'm here for Jesus. To intuitively say the one irrefutable, which is, I'm here for Jesus. And what that means to me, what that means to him, doesn't make any difference in that moment. It's just heart to heart. So let me take this one step farther. One of the very traditional ways of talking about Jesus is that he is my Savior. And I've never studied the church's theology, but I get bits and pieces of it. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you've done, he will save you. And there's also that wonderful word, redeemed, which is, I was in the dark and I've been redeemed. I don't know exactly how we are redeemed, but I think it's because he suffered so much. He paid the karmic debt. All of these theologies actually match Sanatana Dharma. They actually match what Master taught if you can just pull it out and follow it through. There was a woman I saw in a coffee shop one day. It was summertime. She was wearing a tank top, so all her shoulders and back. She was reading a Bible, which you see people who just read the Bible. So it was worn. It had lots of little sticky notes in it. And you could tell that she was really interested in this. And she was like this, and she had kind of crazy hair and tattoos and a few other things, including a tattoo shoulder to shoulder, letters that big that said, redeemed. Just think of the story that brought her to there. It's the same story as every one of us, you know? Maybe this particular incarnation we're living is really hard. Maybe it's not. But if it's not, it has been. That's the whole story. That is entirely 100% of the story, is that we know we were made for bliss. And yet, we keep getting confused. And we keep looking for it in all the wrong ways and in all the wrong places. I was reading something that Swami said recently. Actually, I wrote it. It's the book that I'm working on now, which is all these things that haven't been published anywhere. And Swami just writes, he says, when you see people who are being cruel, who are doing things that they shouldn't do, and my goodness, these days, if you dare to open your computer, you'll get about 100 stories of that. If you look outside this room, you get 100 stories. People who are doing unspeakable things to one another. And he said the tendency is to judge them and to be angry and why are you like this, and to shake your fist and try to get them to stop. He said that very attitude creates so much misery in their hearts. He said there's no need for us to judge. He said what you have to have is compassion. But then Swami also said, he said whenever he sees anyone who's really suffering, and you hear about it or you see it, or sometimes it's the anguishing, intense suffering, and sometimes it's what I think it was Thoreau who said, most men live lives of quiet desperation, which is really a horrifying phrase, just for a Western philosopher to just put in front of us. Quiet desperation. At least if it's tragic, you're preoccupied because you have to deal with it. But it's what Yogananda called the anguishing monotony of it, of what Swami then called longing and regret. Think about that. How much of our lives are just twisted by longing and regret and this desperate effort to stay in front of the grief. Whether that grief is in this lifetime or not. I said to Swamiji very early, I said, sir, I've always just wanted to know how to be happy. And I said, the irony is I've never been unhappy. I did not have a difficult life, have not had. And Swami just looked at me and he said, past incarnations. Just samskars, vrittis within us. That we're always just trying to make sure that we just get it together enough so that it won't overwhelm us. And then something cracks, and you find yourself in what I can only call the zone of grief, the zone of tragedy, and we try to hang it on what just happened. I lost something, I was treated badly, somebody got upset with me. But I have come to know that it's a geological strata. You just get into it in all of those past lives. Because everything you see around you, you have also lived through. Master said we don't learn anything unless we go through it ourselves. That's the good news. We have the free will. That's the bad news, is that we have that free will. And any sadness that you see around you, you've had it. It's buried in there. If you're vulnerable to it at all, if you are affected by other people, it's unresolved in you. So how does this ever finish? Because there is a Savior. You see, that word is so magnificent. And Christianity has the great advantage of being the most guru-oriented religion in the world, which is really ironic in certain ways, because it's 100% about the fact that Jesus saves. They have the theology a little confused about his crucifixion and his suffering and stuff like that, but wow, the details don't matter, friends. What matters is that we know that there is a power, there is a person, there is a loving friend. Whatever you call him, her, it, is really less important, and actually unimportant, except for the fact that you actually know that. And it becomes the most, in fact, the only thing that's important to us, which is what happened to me when that big priest was standing there. He's challenging everything that I'm doing. And all I could say was, I'm here for Jesus. And I thought to myself, why do I ever say anything else? Why do I ever answer any other question, internally or externally? Why did you do that? Why did you think this way? Why didn't you consider? What about this? What about that? I'm here for Jesus. That's all. I'm here for the light. I'm here to open my heart and be redeemed. Redeemed from my own folly, from the momentum that I've set in motion by all the times that I was too cowardly, too lazy, too stupid to make the right decision. At one point, Swami Kriyananda was trying to sort of explain some chaos that was going on in the community, and why did you do this, why did you do that? And Swami, he'd written a manuscript, and in the manuscript he said, well, I made those decisions because I'm stupid. He just wrote, because I'm stupid. And in his way, he would send his in-process manuscripts to various people, and I always dropped everything and read it. I said, sir, your humility is admirable, but there are many, many things I could say about you, but stupid is not one of them. And you just write that, and he said, and the Swami's response was, but I was. I said, maybe you were, sir, but you've got to find some more gracious language. This is just not going to work. And he did rewrite it in some way, which he took responsibility, because we are stupid in retrospect. But it always seemed like a good idea at the time, because we were too cowardly, we were too lazy, we were too dense, we were too egoically involved. There's this reality which I can read in Swami's books, and I can hear, and I can remember from being with him. Swami Kriyananda said, I never identify as Swami Kriyananda. He said, Kriyananda is an event for which I am responsible. He's a brilliant wordsmith, and that was absolutely perfect. And every so often, and I bet you've had it too, you do something, and then somebody comes back to you, usually in praise, sometimes in blame, about what you did, and you don't really know what they're talking about. As Haridas put it once when he would receive compliments for the work, the magnificent spiritual energy he could express, they would say, oh, that was a wonderful service, that was a beautiful song. He said, yes, something inspiring happened and I got to be there. Just a complete, I don't identify with this. Yes, I have to be responsible for it. Even an avatar has to know which body he's supposed to move. He has to know when to eat. He has to know who his mother is. He has to move around this world. But that's quite different than the way most of us live, which is this is me, this is me, this is me. And then the corollary to that is, what about me? What about me? Am I liked? Am I loved? Am I appreciated? Am I looking good? Because we're constantly we're anchored to this littleness, and it goes around and around. But we can be redeemed. And what we're saved from above all is this crazy idea that we even exist. And I mean, I can say those words, but only occasionally, when you just totally forget. We think self-realization is to make this one perfect. And we're always trying, and we're always measuring, we're always tense like this. No. It's to forget that this one is even here. It's just to swim in the ocean without really caring which bubble it is that you're moving. We're just moving through it. And it's the ocean tide. That's what it is to be saved. That's what it is to be redeemed. Is rescued from this very thing that we're so proud of and are always defending. Yes, it's impossible to say in words, but you can find it. You can find it in self-forgetfulness. And the way we forget ourselves is to love something else more. That's all. You just love something else more. One of my friends, his 2 children were born a little bit later in his life, after many years on the path, he said, before my children were born, he said, I thought I was a pretty unselfish guy. He said, and he was. He said, but I had no idea. As soon as those babies were born, one after another, he said, I realized there's a possibility to love so deeply that you simply cease to exist. You see, that's why God compels us to have children, so that we get an idea of our own capacity for selfless love and for self-forgetful love. That's what it is to be redeemed. So no matter what comes to us, the first thing and only thing that occurs to us to say is, I'm here for Jesus. And that's why we're here. We're here for Jesus. We're here for the divine light for all eternity. Joy, joy, joy. Happy Christmas.